All right, welcome everyone to our second forum of Spring 2021. I'm really excited. This is going to be our showcase forum, which is one of our most popular during the semester. Before we get started, I want to give a quick refresh of the kinds of events that are happening in ED this semester. So we have four major things outside of these forums that we are running. The first is the Engineering Education Research Incubator that Nikki is running. She runs that every Thursday at 10 a.m. and you can reach out to her if you're interested. This is a great place to get to know a little more about what it means to do engineering education research, whether in the classroom or about broader issues outside of the classroom. And Nikki's always happy to see new participants there and build that community. We also have the faculty learning community that is about student motivation. We've been running this since the fall, and in the fall we covered several broad theories of motivation. This semester we'll be delving into more specific theories, but do know that you do not have to have been present in the fall semester to be able to participate and engage this semester with the theories we'll be covering. I believe the first theory we'll be covering is self-efficacy, self-concept, and self-esteem, and that's going to be next week on March 1st at 11:30 a.m. That's a Monday. If you're interested, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to add you to that mailing list. We also have, I'm sure you all have noticed the reminders I send out every morning before these meetings happen, the community mentoring meetings around hybrid learning. So if you are running a hybrid or online course this semester, this is a great place for you to connect with other people who are doing the same. You can contribute your expertise and what you've learned in the process and also learn from what your peers are doing. We alternate between Fridays and Mondays, and our next meeting will be this Friday at 2:30 p.m. If you're interested, you can either reach out to me or just directly join the meeting through the link that I send out with the reminder. And then finally, we have our peer mentoring social distance picnics, which I believe are on break right now because of the cold weather. But once the weather warms up, these will meet on Thursdays around breakfast or lunch. And if you're interested in joining those, it's just sort of a casual, informal environment to chat with some of your peers. You can contact Sid Savadati, and he'll add you to that mailing list. He's the one who runs those events. Before I move on, are there any questions about stuff Edie's doing this semester? Alrighty. Then without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 7th semesterly engineering education showcase. Some semesters we do themed showcases like last semester when we did the hybrid and online learning showcase. This semester is an open showcase, which means anything's fair game. We just want to hear about cool things that are happening in the college. So today we'll be hearing from Drs. Eliza Banu and Robert Baffour, who will be talking about some of the work they've been doing through the Delta project at UGA. We'll be hearing from Ben Fahrman, who will be talking about some of the cool things that he's been doing in his classroom since COVID started. And also from Brock Woodson, who will be joining us a little later around 1:30 to talk about the cool things that he's been doing in his classroom. Ben and Brock have really taken advantage of COVID to try some new things they've been considering for a while and see how they go. And I look forward to hearing from them about that, as well as from our first presenters, Eliza and Robert, who are going to talk about some of the work they've done with Delta. So the floor is yours.
Robert, do you want me to share the?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, it's kind of a little small though, but I think I should be able to manage. All right, so just a quick, as you can see from the slide, you see a big triangle on the top left that says Delta, and Delta is an UGA-wide NSF grant that is looking at quality classroom instruction. So Delta actually is department and leadership teams, action, all kinds of combination of words like that. And it is, there are different departments involved, and engineering is one of the colleges involved in this 5-year NSF project. And I'm the lead in our college. So right now, every year we pick 4 faculty to join us to discuss all kinds of things that we can do in the classroom to change the way we support our students. The principal focus is active-based learning. In essence, what kind of active-based learning tool do you use in your class to make sure students really benefit? So we've been doing this for, I think, 2 years now. And every year we pick a particular theme. Last year, the theme we picked was using test blueprints. And interestingly, I didn't know anything about it. I have never used test blueprints. I'm getting to my 25th year of teaching after graduation. And for almost all these years, I never heard of anything called test blueprints. And I'm assuming, some of you probably have not heard about that either, because nobody tells you what to do when you go to school and graduate. You just go and they give you a job and you just step in the classroom, whether you can teach or not, that is your own business. And so we spent last year doing this. And interestingly, just today we did put in a proposal to host a TED Blueprint Roundtable during this year's ASEE conference. And just today, I actually got the notification of acceptance. So I just sent the notice to my group that they have accepted our proposal to host a 1-hour thing. Thank you, guys. So this is so I'm gonna we are about 5 involved in this. At least last year, myself, Eliza, Nathaniel, Grace, and Hillary, we develop our own different blueprints, and we're gonna try to leave as much time so that you can ask all the questions, because this is an evolving thing. I was going through this and I noticed I have actually gone past what we have here, and hopefully with our presentation coming out, we'll probably get more information to share with our colleagues in different parts of the country. And so generally what test blueprint is like a regular blueprint. If you want to build a house, you need a blueprint. That pretty much becomes the framework upon which you build a house. If your blueprint is not there, you're going to build a house anyway. And I think that is classically how most of us set our exams. Now, this is basically on test. You sit down and you say, well, what do I want to test my students with? And we just set the questions. Most of the time, you don't look at your learning outcomes. You don't look at your course objectives. You set a test. And then if after a while, if you take your test, very good, thanks. If you take your test and you actually try to link it back to your learning outcomes and objectives for the course, at times you may realize for test 1, you probably tested only 50% of what you wanted your student to respond to. And that is what test blueprint is all about. So it's nothing but a little guide. It's a plan that will guide you to link the assessment that you give to your student to what you expect them to know. And I think this is very powerful. The whole of last summer, I spent a chunk of my summer understanding a new concept of teaching called backward design. Very interesting for those who are familiar with it. It's a very interesting concept where you should really know what you want the student to know before you even think of setting the assessment and stuff. And so what we did was 5 of us, sat down and spent a whole year going through what test blueprints are, what it does. And so this was our primary objective. Our objective was to, number 1, understand the concept of test blueprints, because we didn't know what it was. Look at the structure. What are the different structures that you can use? Because if you're teaching a course in English, your blueprint may be different. If we found out Hillary, because she's teaching design of CAD and stuff, the blueprint that I use for my engineering decision didn't work for her, and so she has to come up with a different one. Eliza is teaching fluid mechanics, so we have different structures that you have to adopt to do test blueprint. So we look into different structures and we did create our own. That is the beauty of it. We were able to create different versions, and hopefully, what you see on the screen is mine. I'll share mine with you, and then I think Grace and Eliza also share. I'm not so sure about Nathaniel and Hillary. I know Hillary cannot make it today, but I'm not sure about Eliza. I mean, about Nathaniel, whether he's here or not. All right. And so, you know, just a quick before I move on to get Eliza to also show her stuff. What you see at the top, you know, the one is my course. I teach engineering decision making, which is pretty much engineering economics. Students using financial models and financial computational tools to calculate cost and, you know, future value of money, time value of money, that kind of stuff. And so that is what you see now. The 2019 is an example of a test that I did without knowing what test blueprint was. And so when I took the 2019 and I went back and tried to actually put them in the various categories in terms of my course objectives and my learning outcomes, this is what I got. You know, if you look at the data, it shows I have, you know, I can see very about 20%, 22% of them fall in this area, 44% fall in that area. And then in terms of cognitive levels, I have, you know, knowledge, understanding, and analysis. And I find a way to partition it. This is after the fact. Okay, so this after the fact. Now, once I realized, 44% of the questions I gave to the student fit into the understanding mode. 25%, only 25 fit in the analysis mode. The question that you ask yourself is that what you want your student to get from your class at the end of exam one? If the answer is no, no, that means the way you set the question, the way you set the assessment was wrong. And that is the whole purpose of using test blueprint. So after going through this, in the course of the semester, I said, well, I'm going to now design my test blueprint before I set the questions itself. You know, that is the idea. So now I want to create a blueprint. I need to create a plan before I build a house. I cannot just call the mason and the carpentry and be on the ground with them and say, put a wall here. No, if you do that, you'll be collapsing walls and foundations, everything will be. So here, I had an interesting foundation that I developed, and that is my framework. And I said, well, I'm going to set my question based on that. In this particular case, I know exactly what I want to test the students on. If I want the student to know some material, because for the first one, there were things I realized I was not even testing the students on. So the ones you see in yellow are example of what I should have tested the student on, but I did not because I was doing the thing just without consulting any plan. I was going through this, like I said today, and I've seen I've gone way past this, and I've changed the way my language. For instance, I don't use understanding anymore in terms of the Bloom taxonomy because that is a difficult thing to measure, and so I've moved away from the understanding, and I'm adding more. You know, for instance, there are so many models I teach them in terms of course models. I was not testing any of the course models. Now I test them on you know, things that Walmart used to be competitive, I teach in my class, and I now test them on every single test. So this is in a nutshell, what the test blueprint is all about. So I'm going to stop here and let Eliza also share her test blueprint. So you see, there's a lot of variation from mine and hers. But remember, there's nothing. This is not cut in stone. You can design any blueprint you want. The bottom line is whether it is achieving the purpose to which you set the blueprint for. You know, so I can set my blueprint and I build my house with a brick. She can also set a blueprint and build a house with, stucco or, whatever it is. The bottom line is there should be a blueprint so that at least it can guide you and you can always go back. Now, the purpose of the blueprint, again, is to make sure that you test the students. For me, I think all what you're trying to do is you make sure the quality of your assessment is good. And what you are set up for the student to know, you are tested them on it. And therefore, hopefully in the future, it can improve performance of the students' ability to do the work that you want them to do once they graduate. All right, so Eliza, you have the floor.
Yeah, so if in the previous slide, we kind of shared, we have a QR code for all of our test blueprints that we worked on last semester. This one is for in the biochemistry. This is Grace's for her mass transport and ray phenomena blueprint. Grace, if you want to kind of share, like in a minute or so, your conclusion on this.
Chris, you muted.
Sorry. We also have a few from Nathaniel. He was teaching a circuits course, and he did a very similar analysis and a very similar test blueprint. I'm not sure how we are with time, John. And then Hillary, as Robert mentioned, this is hers for graphics, and she had to do it a completely different way just because of the nature of her course. This is mine on fluid mechanics. So what I did, I know it kind of looks way more complicated than you should, but there are actually two test blueprints in one. So the first, it's kind of separated here. The first side on the left side, I'm looking at the same levels, cognitive levels of knowledge, comprehension, and then I had a little bit of design, a synthesis of everything, and I separated for each concept. I wanted to look at the learning outcomes that I have for the entire course, but then how do they apply for each topic? So if I have 3-4 topics in an exam, how do the learning objective apply to objectives for the entire course apply to each topic? So my results were that I'm asking them a lot to analyze and a lot to show me that they understand when to use Bernoulli, for instance, and this was all based on the number of points that they received rather by the number of questions, because they usually have 2 or 3 problems to solve. So based on the number of points, total points that they were awarded for each topic, I kind of understood that my test is heavily dosed into analysis and comprehension, discussion on a certain outcome. The second way that I did a test blueprint was to look at each problem. So they had 4 problems for all of these topics, and kind of what kind of lower mid cognitive or higher cognitive level they had to utilize for each one of these problems. And again, I kind of gave them, I looked at the number of points for each one of these levels, and they were pretty balanced in lower, mid, and higher cognitive level. So I was really happy. The fact that, to me, it shows that all students, even the students that prepare more or the students that prepare less to this exam, they would have a good chance of getting a grade. However, what this test blueprint showed to me was the fact that they have a lot of material to cover. So one thing that I changed for this fall is I am splitting my exams. They are not going to have only 3 exams where they can have a lot of topics. I am moving to more exams to have less topics, but not less cognitive levels. Or change in the way that I do analysis and comprehension. John, how are we with time?
9 minutes left, including Q&A.
Oh.
Okay. So if there are any questions.
There should be questions.
Yeah, thank you to all 3 of you for presenting this. I thought it was really interesting. So this is the format of the showcase. So folks present, and then we have some open time for questions for each presentation. So please feel free to ask anything you like.
I have a quick question, and then a follow-up maybe for everybody. Just to confirm, these blueprints are given to the students before the exams, right?
It depends how you want to use them. So you can show them the blueprint of the exam before, or you can do the blueprint after the exam. Mine was after the exam, after I've put it all together. So if you do the exam in advance and not just few hours before you have to print it, then you can go ahead and do the test blueprint. You look through it and you're saying, oh, I'm asking them too much to do. So you can change in a certain area or in a certain learning outcomes, and you can change the exam accordingly to make sure it's balanced the way that you see fit for your learning objectives and your cognitive levels. So the purpose of this is mostly to help you redo your exam in such a way that is fidelity is to the student learning outcomes, either per topic or per the entire course, depending how you choose to do it.
In my case, I have not given them the blueprints yet. I haven't actually considered that. What my TA and myself have been doing lately is for every assignment, we give them the rubrics, very detailed rubrics. And I think it is changing the way they do their work as well. So I can see that helping. So, I'll look into possibly giving the test blueprint, because when you give them the test blueprint, all what they will see is, well, you should know how to do this, and there'll be one question here, and it will be, yeah. So I think that definitely what Grace, I think that's a good thing. So we may consider doing that as well.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for your thoughts on that. The other thing about the blueprints is it's not necessarily a document for students per se. So, but it depends on what the perhaps what the instructional objective for the instructor is. I think the goal of the blueprint is for you as an instructor to think about the breadth of the exams or tests you are providing. And there are two parts to the blueprint. Blueprints that covers that. One, in terms of when you think about how much of what you have thought are you necessarily assessing? So how much of it do you want to assess? So that's the first question you ask. So you're essentially trying to make sure that the exam is not superly focused on just some set of concepts, whereas you have taught a whole lot of concepts that you could have assessed. Then the other thing with the blueprint is that you also want to see the level to which you are assessing, as in cognitively, the level, the depth to which you are testing different concepts. For example, you have low level, mid-range, and then high level cognitive thinking that you expect of students, ranging from whether they can recall some basic facts, whether they understood some things, all the way down to whether they could transfer that knowledge or apply the knowledge in a different context. So those are layers of cognitive activities that students might be able to do off of your the content you have taught them. So the goal of the blueprint, in essence, is to not just cover the breadth of what your course is designed to, what you are teaching the students in the course, but to see how many of your items are at a superficial level, how many of them are at like a mid-range cognitive level, how many of them are like application, transfer, analysis, and the like, the more cognitively dense level. So your goal with the goal of the blueprint is to make sure that you balance all those different things so that the exam is not going to be heavy on one side and devoid of others.
If I can add something to what Nathaniel just said. For instance, in my case, my exam number 1 is testing the basic concept of the first 3 weeks of the semester. And so you don't expect the student to do any complex analysis in that exam number 1. So if you look at my test blueprint, I may have maybe 30% or so of analysis, and even this analysis are low level. Exam number 2 is when I begin the whole analysis process. So my entire exam number 2 may not have any knowledge issue. I don't expect them to come and what is this, that kind of stuff. Maybe some little understanding, but maybe 60–70% will be pure analysis, and so that is how this is. Now, one thing that we haven't really done yet, and I think most of the faculty probably will allude to this, is when you set your exams, how do you know whether the student can finish or they cannot finish? Because we just set the questions and give to them, and if you set exams and the students are rushing to give the paper back to you, that means you did a bad job generally. So what I normally do is, whenever I give my student exam, I check the time that the first student submit, and I keep taking that tally to calculate the frequencies, and so that I can see what percentage of the students were able to finish the first 30 minutes in the first 1 hour. If 70% of your students are finishing at the end, that means so I think in the future, we may need to look into how do you use test blueprint to help you also determine the time that your student will use to be able to do your test.
One last
So it might be good to move on to another question here. So we're at the official end of the Q&A time, but Ben has ceded a bit of his time and says he's very interested to hear Joe's question. So Joe, if you'd like to ask.
It's maybe a question that we don't need to, thank you, fully answer, but it was sort of following up on the different uses of this. And I was particularly curious about the relationship of the blueprint to Abet. It's sort of on a different level of granularity, but it could be really productive in linking that also to Abet outcomes and having maybe a more meaningful discussion about this. The other thing that I was interested in maybe listening to you is, could this also be a communication tool between instructors, say, who teach different sections of the same course to, not to unify, make everything uniform, but have a conversation about exams. So I was thinking about could it link to Abet in productive ways, and could it be a communication tool between instructors?
If I can take a quick cut at it, I think I'll take the second part first. We did discuss the faculty who teach multiple courses. And I think that is where Hillary and her group were coming from, 1120. So if you can develop a very solid blueprint, you guys are testing the same objectives, you are testing the same learning outcome, and you agree to set 2 questions on each of those learning outcomes. Therefore, you can go and set your own questions, and and even harmoniously, they probably end up having the same level of difficulty. That means you are assessing the same students with the same material. So we discussed that. Right now it is, this is a very evolving project. So hopefully as a college, we will probably find more time and expand on this, because every year we take a different theme. And so now the first question is about the Abet Criterion. We really didn't go there, but at least if you look at our learning objectives for each course, to some extent it ties into that. Even though it doesn't tie into that directly, generally it does. And so if I have, 10 learning outcomes in my course, I can break it down into the 7 Abet criteria as well. But I think it would be nice to really, for instance, if you want to do analysis as enshrined by Abet, you can actually focus on that and do that as well. So I think, as we do this more, hopefully, as part of our preparation for our roundtable, my team and I probably will take a look at some of these and see if we can address them, how they may become interesting for people from ASCE.
Thank you. And thanks, Ben, for ceding some of your time.
So one thing I would like to ask of the presenters, I think this is a really cool thing that you all have been exploring, and I would love to, it would be great if we could have a resource that could help amplify this approach to the college. I'm wondering if you would be willing to create a short handout of, if I want to create a test blueprint for an exam that I'm developing, what are the steps I need to do to develop that? If you could create something like that, I'd be happy to share it along with the recording of this forum, as well as post it on our website as a resource that's available to everyone.
I think, guys, I think because this is the beauty of this, we just got, like I said, we just got this proposal accepted to actually host this 1 hour. So what John is saying will be maybe we can use this opportunity to actually create that, so we can even share that with our participants during the roundtable. So I think we probably will be able to put together something like that to share with our colleagues here in the college also.
To amplify those materials to the rest of the college. All right, Ben, the floor is yours.
Thanks, John. So my I don't know, my talk is going to be, it's going to build off of what we just talked about. This is something that I've been thinking about for a few years, and I'll talk about what I implemented. And I guess before I talk about what I implemented, I got a few stories that happened, I don't know, within the past month that I think are related to an extent to what I'm going to talk about. So the first story is that one of my MATLAB students is just well ahead of the game, and he would have been bored if he just sort of followed along with everybody. And so I reached out to him pretty early on and found out that he's really interested in machine learning. So we're trying to figure out machine learning together. I don't know anything about it, or I didn't at the beginning of the semester, but we're trying to figure that out together. We sort of figured out how it works in theory, and then we started looking into how it works in practice, and we started looking at people who did it well, people who what they learned from failing. So, as an example, one study or one machine learning enthusiast that we found was trying to apply machine learning to Tetris, to have a machine that would win at Tetris. And they went through and did the learning part, but as part of that learning, you have to tell the machine when it's done well and when it's done poorly. And basically what they told it to do is avoid losing. And they told it to avoid losing by saying that the longer the game goes, the better it is. And the game paused the game, or the machine paused the game and then just stopped playing, right? And I just thought that was, I thought it was adorable, because I've never empathized with the machine more. You know, they basically programmed a fear of failure into a machine. There are many more differences between machine learning and human learning than there are similarities, but there are some similarities. One, they both need to know how to succeed, which I'll touch on later. They both need lots of opportunity for practice, which is, I think, the main thrust of this presentation. And they both, oh yeah, so thanks, Nikki. I didn't, sometimes when you hit the present the slideshow, it goes to a different screen, so I'm just leaving it here. So, and they both need positive and negative feedback, right? So this is an important part. Another side story, and these next two are related to other ED events. I've find tremendous value in these ED events, and I'm gonna plug them right now. This side story comes from the peer mentoring meetings. A few weeks ago, somebody said that homework is the opportunity for students to assess their own learning, and exams are the opportunity for instructors to assess the students' learning. And I think this is the way it was meant to be. I think this is maybe how it used to be, but I'm convinced that this isn't how it works in my class. And I think we've got time. I mean, if there's anybody who's teaching and doing exams and giving homework, I would love to just take a break for a minute to hear your feedback on this, especially these two questions. Do you believe that students are using homework assignments to assess their learning? And do you believe that exam performance accurately represents a student's abilities? Yeah, Kuhn said that. Thanks. I am convinced that the way I'm doing homework, students, I mean, there's some implicit assessment in there, right? That if the students can perform everything that's needed to complete the homeworks, then there's some implied assessment there. And if they can't, then there's some implied assessment. But I haven't structured a way for students to reflect on the homework. And so maybe this is just a shortcoming in my class, but I don't think my students are actively reflecting on their performance in the homework. And I've also come to believe recently that I believe exam performance is more representative of a student's ability to manage anxiety during the exam than it is their actual ability for the student learning outcomes, for instance. So these are what's made me question exams for a few years. So my last side story for the ED Incubator, a few weeks ago, we talked about educational axioms, or maybe STEM educational axioms, and I'm going to propose one now, and it's that you get better at that which you practice, right? I think we can all agree with that. If you want to get better at something, you have to practice, and the things that you practice are the things you get better at. So I think we need to structure practice for our students so that, and this is sort of in line with what Robert was saying about backward design, we need to think about what we want our students to be able to do after a class or after a course or after the curriculum that they couldn't do before, right? Start with that and then shape everything else around that. We need to, again, we need to structure the practice around that, but then we also need to give them credit for doing those things. And we need to give feedback on the things that we've asked them to do. So this combined is why I don't like what I'm going to call traditional exams. The traditional exam schedule, and I think it's more the schedule of exams that I have issue with than the exams themselves. Traditional exams, I mean, 1 to 5 exams a semester, each one taking 1 to 3 hours, and each exam and the combined total of these exams is an enormous portion of the final course grade in many of these courses. Students are often working quietly and alone, and I think students often feel rushed when they do this. And I've been wondering why we do it this way. I think the main reason to do it is that it's a quick and easy way to get an assessment of the entire class. The students see how they're doing, we see how they're doing, and I think that's the motivation behind doing it the way we've been doing it. I think the cons are that this is my biggest pet peeve here, is that the assessments are not representative of real world activities. And what I mean is that I don't mean that the problems on the exam don't match real world problems. I mean, as professionals in industry, I don't think they're ever going to have to sit alone and work alone for 3 hours, sort of furiously writing to come up with a few numbers, right? The assessments are also very high stress, very high anxiety events. And the schedule encourages cramming for these exams. We can come back to that if we want. But so what I started doing this last semester, and I've been mulling this over about why I'm actually doing this all week since John asked me to do this. But this sort of reflection is healthy, I think. So I started creating weekly exams. When I've explained these to my students, they ask, why are you even calling these things exams? And it's just because I've used the word quiz for something else. But I have them every week. They're on Friday. They still work alone in a controlled environment. Basically, what I mean is that I'm asking them to, on their own, analyze the situation. They're not working together. They're not using outside resources, hopefully. They have 15 to 25 minutes to analyze one problem. And it's key that this problem is aligned well with the lessons from the last exam. So the lessons in the past week. This is the rubric that I'm using for these. It is, it's on the syllabus. It's public knowledge. Basically, if they didn't submit anything, it's a 0. If they put in a lot of effort, but nothing was right, which unfortunately happens a lot, they get a 25%. If the free body diagram is correct, they get a 50%. If the free body plus some other things are correct, they get 75. If everything's correct, they get 100. And I mean, it can be sort of adjusted a little bit after that. But the reason I've done this is that the free body diagram is the most important thing in this entire class that I teach. Most of my students do not know how to draw a free body diagram when they enter statics. And I think if I had to pick one thing that they have to understand to move forward to the next class, it's drawing free body diagrams. So they can't score above a 50 without having a free body diagram that's correct. Now, I think this sort of implies that a lot of my students might be failing exams. I don't think they are. They're still scoring very well, but this is just a way to show them this is how you score points in this class, because this is what's most important in this class. And it's also, if a student only drew free body diagrams and did nothing else for the exams, they could still pass the class, because the exams, total exams in my class are 60% of the final course grade. So let me talk about some benefits. I guess what's different between these weekly exams and what I'm calling the traditional exams. Believe it or not, I spend less time grading. I used to have a monthly exam that took 2 hours, and it was an outside of the class. It was a mass exam. Now I have one problem a week that I have to grade, so it feels much more manageable, and I'm spending less time grading. I think this is probably the most important thing, is that the structure of the class, the fact that there aren't monthly exams and there are weekly exams, students are not cramming in my class. Every week is the same. They practice every day. And I don't think they're cramming before a Friday exam, because they have these every week. And I think we know that spaced practice is more effective than sort of cramming. Students get more frequent feedback on the exams. I have observed but not measured that these assessments are much less anxiety inducing. Maybe cumulative anxiety or total anxiety might be the same, but at least you're spreading it out, right? They're not stressing over these small exams as they would a large exam. I am spending an enormous amount of time facilitating this, as far as like uploading exams to ELC and whatnot, but I think that's mostly because of COVID. If everybody were in person, I don't think it would be taking up any more of my time than a normal exam. I have a little bit of student feedback for this. He said the structure of this class is excellent. Specifically, he's talking about the small exams every week. He loves getting more practice, more feedback, faster results. This person, I feel like this is a bit of Stockholm syndrome. He says it's a pain to do, but he knows that it's helping his performance. Which maybe this is more about justifying to your students the decisions that you make, and they'll believe it. I'm not going to cherry pick this. One of my students said that it's excessive, the number of assignments that I gave, and I think it was excessive last semester. But my goal for last semester was to make it so that my students could not spend significant time without thinking about statics, because I thought with them having to be remote, I thought it could be pushed on the back burner for too long. So I made an excessive amount of assignments last semester. So I had a conclusion slide on here, and I took it off because I don't think I don't mean to advocate for. Well, I am advocating. I don't mean to recommend one approach over the other. I'm not saying that anybody else should change because this is better, but I think the main advantage of the weekly exams over the monthly exams is that it structures the practice for the students to be spread out, to be well spaced, so that they have to think about this class every week. And honestly, they have to think about it every day because they have daily homeworks. And it's never, and maybe this was one of the student feedbacks, it's never an overwhelming amount. That's what another student said. It's never an overwhelming amount, but it's always a lot. That's what I was told. And I think that's really my goal, is to have a lot of challenges for them, but not an overwhelming amount. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. I would love to get some feedback on this. Mostly I wanted to present this because, one, even though it's new for me with COVID, I think it's something that I'm gonna keep after COVID. And I've been thinking about this so much over the last week that I wanted to get feedback from anybody else who's giving exams and has any feedback. So thanks.
Hello, Ben. I have a question.
Yeah.
So because you talk about 15 to 25 minutes every week for this small exam, then how do you organize your course materials? Because I know if I spend 15 or 25 minutes every week, I cannot finish my content.
I've also flipped the class, and I haven't slowed down at all on the content. So basically, they have the same expectations on an exam day as they have on any other day. I usually, on any day, I give them enough problems to work through that they could not finish them all, so they don't feel it's any different on exam days than on non-exam days.
Okay.
And those problems are not collected; they're just practice problems. The things that we do in class are not collected, so there's no. It doesn't hurt them that they don't finish it on exam days.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, I see you raise your hand.
Ben, I have a question, but I want you to answer this one first. And I'm gonna state, you started with, experience and improvement, which I support 100%. So if I say, I'm gonna state this in a hypothesis form, that if you increase the frequency of assessment, it probably matches the student general improvement at the end of the semester. Would you consider that to be true?
So when we say student improvement, do we mean
let's say their final assessment?
Sorry, I missed that.
I think we might have lost Robert at an opportune moment there.
He's frozen on my screen. I just wanted to.
I think so. I can't hear anybody. That means I froze. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right. Yeah. So for us, we see I think I support you 100% on that, but I want to, see if that is where you want to take this to. That if you increase the level of assessment like you're doing now, then at the end of the semester, you expect the student to perform better than if you're assessing them 4 times in a semester.
Perform better on assessments?
At the end of the semester, remember, at the end of the semester, you want, let's say, okay, the reason why I'm asking this question is this. I want us to look at the data that you have now. And I'm assuming you've been teaching this for a while. You have several cohorts that you have done outside this new assessment tool, right?
So the problem is that I started this
4 times like
the
every
semester of.
So if I take this new group of students that you've been treating with this new regime in terms of testing them every single week, and at the end of the semester, let's say 40%, or let's say at the end of the semester, the average grade is 79. how would that compare to the previous semester that you were testing them 4 times in a semester?
Yeah, yeah, good question. One problem is that I started this last semester, the first semester of the COVID change in modalities. So I wouldn't be confident that if I had done the same thing, the exams would compare to what was going on before COVID. I think I would have to try this after COVID to know for sure. I don't think the grades have changed, honestly, and they haven't changed, I think, because of this rubric. This rubric can be harsh if they don't draw free body diagrams. And I'm sort of blaming the harshness on the rubric when it's in fact my harshness, but this rubric is unforgiving if you don't have a free body diagram. So some people are excelling in statics and some people are floundering, and it's the dividing line is this free body diagram. And I think that's the way that it should be. I think I'm hoping that everybody can draw a free body diagram by the end of statics, but I am hoping that they aren't passing if they can't draw a free body diagram. So I think the rubric is effective, but it's also, this rubric is new to this method of weekly exams, and I don't think I could compare final course grades now to course grades before I did this with much meaning.
Okay, I would love to see something like that though, because I mean, if the whole thing rests on the free body diagram, then the question is, if you take the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of your course and just teach free body diagram, would you get the same results?
So I'll defend this a little bit. I spend the first few weeks covering the basics on what to do with free body diagrams, and then I spend the next 7 weeks talking about how to draw free body diagrams and how they can become more complex in more complex situations. So but there's a week in there in between, this is what I wanted to say, where I give them the free body diagram and I just ask them to use that free body diagram to tell me some forces. By the end of that week, they find it trivial. It's very easy for them to take a free body diagram and analyze that free body diagram. What's extremely difficult for them is to take a situation, a real world situation, and draw the free body diagrams that will help inform them in some way. That's why free body diagrams is the separator in my mind.
Okay.
Nathaniel?
Yeah. I think Robert touched on a question that actually has a very strong empirical support. There have been reviews and meta-analysis on the effectiveness of testing. So, but the question then is, how do you pitch that to your students? There's what we call the testing effect in cognitive learning theory. That describes the cognitive as well as metacognitive benefits of frequent testing to students. So I would expect that. I guess what trying to recall your name now, Ben. I guess what Ben has been doing so much in looking at whether students have improved on the exam, that's a little bit tricky if the final grade on the exam is the focus, is what we're looking at. But generally, students' ability to do what they're supposed to do, the students' ability to understand the essential concepts, I think that would improve with time if they have frequent testing of those things, because what that does for them is that they are retrieving those information constantly, which is reinforcing that cognitively for them.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing about this is that this is strange, but I'm questioning the validity of exam giving while giving more exams, right? But I'm questioning the results. I don't think the results on an exam, at least on a traditional exam, are representative of the student's knowledge. I think they are more representative of the student's ability to manage the anxiety. I think the main reason that I'm sticking with this is not to improve exam performance. It's to space out the students' practice, to stop them from cramming, to give them more feedback. And somebody, I think, put a message on the presentation earlier about what if there are 1 or 2 topics every week. I think that's a reason that it works well in statics, is that there are 1 or 2 topics every week, and every subsequent week depends on the topics of the previous. So they need that frequent feedback to know whether they're prepared for the next week.
In addition to what you've said, I think how exam is pitched is what becomes what might be the problem, because if the exam in quote is intended to be formative, because if you have multiple testing points across the semester, what that does is it enhances practice effect. And then you think about the effect of practicing. Students are forced to practice because they want to do well. And then they are forced to learn the material over time, so which enhances retrieval, and it creates more connection for them in memory. So those things are very good when you think about the brain architecture. I think it has a very powerful effect. The only challenge is if exam is pitched at high stakes in this type of a scenario, then you have just bumped up anxiety by several effects.
So this is an awesome conversation. And I've got to say, I'm always astounded by how excited and enthusiastic you all are about these Q&A sessions. Would that I had the same problem in my courses. But I do want to make sure we have sufficient time for Brock Woodson to go ahead and give his chat on cool things that he's been doing this semester. So Brock, I would like to pass the floor to you.
Thanks, John. I'll have to say first off that I feel like I'm a bit of an imposter here, having taught like 2 classes in this flip format to undergraduate students, where most of you are on 8 or 10. But anyway, you know, I only teach a graduate course in spring, and the graduate course tends to wrap up a lot of the lectures and things by March. And so last spring, I kind of like, well, my students are on the research projects. We met and just had discussions, and so there wasn't much to do. But it did leave me a little bit more time to not have to frantically try to transition and think more about how I was going to run my class in the fall. And the things that when I've already been thinking about redesigning my fluid mechanics course, and the things that kind of popped up to me that I wanted to ensure that students had were, through the semester, given everything that was going on, were consistency, empathy, and accountability. Those are the 3 things that I wanted to make sure that all the students had. And the way that I decided to do this is not really, I don't think, necessarily that novel. For consistency, one of the things that I did was I abandoned the Wiley Plus online program and textbook that I'd been using. And the reason for that is that I'd always been a proponent of having students getting material in different ways, and so that they have different types of explanations. But what I found was that more often than not, it was confusing them. So they would see methods in the textbook and see methods that I taught them differently and then mix them on exams. And so this was kind of a troubling thing. And so what I did was I went back to all for those of you who don't know, my fluid mechanics course is flipped and I made videos for all of them. I actually went back over the summer to all my videos and wrote up a mini textbook that follows every section of all of my videos spot on directly. And so that I can say, here's the 3 sections, this page, these 2 pages, and the examples are the same. And so it follows along and the students can, and I actually reference the videos in the text where you can link to them and watch them and see how I go through and explain things. And so, and that was kind of the consistency thing. The delivery that the students got was the same no matter what format they were getting it. And I had several students, and I noticed especially on a couple of the areas where they were mixing methods up, that completely went away. And then I felt like the students really kind of had a better grasp of what was going on. Because some of these things, again, we don't want that formulaic, I just learned a formula and plug it in. I restructured the quizzes so that, you could get a reasonably good grade, 75 to 80 if you just plugged in the numbers and could walk through the process. But then to really get a B or an A, you had to answer some of these questions on, well, what happens if we change this or that to try to get at those issues. For empathy, what I did was recognizing that students are already under a lot of stress is I got rid of all my homeworks essentially. And what I did was, so in the past, I'd had homeworks due roughly every week that were on Wiley Plus, automatically graded. Instead, in class with the flipped classroom, we work problems as a class, and I have anywhere from 4 to 6 problems ready, queued up to go. And what I did instead was the students were required to hand in the last homework problem of each problem set every week of every day. So they had 2 problems roughly a week. My class meets Tuesday, Thursday, so it was only 2. But then they had motivation there. I've reduced their workload, but they had motivation to come to class and work hard because I told them, if we get to that problem in class, you have opportunity to basically do your homework in class and you can turn it in at that point. And I really saw a much higher engagement in the classroom, even via Zoom, doing problems every day, because I think the students recognize that if I come to class and I do this work, then I won't have to do it later. Now, that said, I worked in little anecdotes and stories that I could tell about problems, so we never quite got to all of them every day. But I felt like, and the students, again, I think felt that they had a little bit more control over their assignments and the work they had to do, and allowed me to put a little bit more focus on the learning. The other thing that I did, was similar to what Ben was just talking about, is I got rid of my 3 big exams that I normally did during the semester. And I went to quizzes, and this, along with the empathy and recognizing the test anxiety that Ben was talking about, because I kind of believe that pretty strongly too, that performance on exams is really a measure of how well you handle anxiety and stress more than whether or not you understand the material. Is to, along that accountability issue, is that having those weekly assignments and having quizzes every 2 weeks essentially force students to be accountable. They had to keep up with the material. And so I didn't change how the quiz problems were set up essentially in a lot of ways. They're the same difficulty as the exams, but instead of having basically like 5 questions per exam with 3 exams, I had 5 quizzes with 3 questions. So I assessed the same amount. And I had, over the course of the semester, like 5 or 6 students wait behind after exams and tell me individually how they were terrified of having 5 exams when they first heard the class, that after the 3rd and 4th one, they're like, I'm so glad you did this, Dr. Woodson, because it forced me to keep up with the class. And part of that is I front loaded them as well. So we started with quiz every 2 weeks for the first like 6 weeks of the semester. And then the last 2 quizzes were spread out by more like 3.5 weeks. And part of that was because the material simply got harder and we spent more time talking about it. So, you know, that's really the only things I did in class. I don't know that, again, it was all that innovative, but I felt like it worked. You know, even in my course evaluations, the students all said they really appreciated how consistent everything was. They liked having more low risk quizzes. You know, there's less at stake, low stakes things. And then the final thing that I did that I think really helped is I joined their GroupMe so that they could message me whenever they needed help. And I was responsive to that. And I think the students really enjoyed that. Occasionally, I think they might have typed in something to the non-professor GroupMe that went to me, but you know, I just answered it anyway and just didn't act like anything was going on. But that's really all I was going to talk about. I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare today. I wasn't even sure I was going to make it until Sunday night fairly late. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I want to give Brock a quick thanks for being willing to, you know, adjust schedules at the last minute and join us. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So when you change the name from exam to the quizzes, do you feel the students feel like the quiz will be easier than the exam, even if you use the same question? Because I have the same experience with linear system. Yeah. Instead of giving them 2 exams, I give them bi-weekly quizzes. But I feel like the students, when I taught them a quiz, they feel like the quiz they should not prepare as the exam. Even if it's 2 or 3 problems, but the exam it was 6 problems. And also it's time consuming when you give them bi-weekly exam in terms of makeup quizzes, especially in my linear system. I have big classroom. So every week we have a quiz. I have almost 10 students ask for makeup. And this is, I need to schedule another time. That's the issue I have with these quizzes.
I had to give several times I had to give makeup slots, and I found it relatively easy because I did everything through ELC with quizzes. And so I would just restrict access, change the problems a little bit, use other ones and put them in. And so in some cases I offered 5 different times. And that was something that physically, if I had to have the students in class, I couldn't do that because I wouldn't be able to find space or couldn't go do it. But because of Zoom, I go, yeah, sure. You know, I'm sitting here, I can pull up Zoom and you can take your exam and I'll work and just make sure you're not doing anything. I didn't really do much other than having students log into Zoom so that I could watch what they were doing as far as, you know, making sure they're not doing things they weren't supposed to. And in actuality, my in-class, the 4 or 5 students actually that came to take the exams and the ones that took it at home, the ones that took it at home did about 3 points on average lower grades on all the quizzes. So, but overall, I felt like that was really comparable. So there wasn't like a big discrepancy in the quiz grades, which I felt was a good sign. And then I also use the automatic grading. So I put the problems in each section and put the formulas in. And so really, if they got the problem right, I didn't really have to go look at it. So with 3 problems, I could often grade the entire quiz. I had 2 sections back to back. I would have the first section graded before the second section was over. And then by the time I'd finished my lunch, I'd have all 40 quizzes graded each week. And
your final exam is comprehensive, yes?
Yeah, it is, but well, that's not true. So this semester I did something a little different. I offer an exemption. So if you have an A, you can exempt the final. And then one thing I did do is, and I've done this in the past where I allow parts of the final to replace grades. And this semester I actually made the final exam was 6 problems covering the 6 major things that all the quizzes covered. And then, because I ended up giving 6 quizzes. And so I had 1 question for each quiz. And if you did better on that problem, I replaced your quiz grade. And that was and I did that because in the past I'd always done exam reworks, but with this faster quiz progress, I didn't have time to do that. And so I let students basically replace the grade if they did better on the final with each quiz.
Yeah, I like the idea you give them if they do in the one question in the final exam better than the quiz for this question.
Yeah, I mapped each quiz, I mapped directly to one of the quizzes.
Yeah, for me, I give them option to drop the lowest quiz to reduce the number of the requests for makeup. So I give them 5 quizzes during the semester and they can drop the lowest one. But the exam, the final exam is mandatory for all students. It's not optional and it's comprehensive.
So Robert, I saw you raising your hand earlier.
Yeah, I wanted to ask before I know, I like what Brock and Ben are doing with the multiple testing. In essence, you test, concept by concept, and this, and I think that the beauty of that is, what I do in my class, I give the student 4 exams, and each exam may have maybe multiple concepts, to test, which may be. So I'm going to try this approach. But the question I have is, and I think it just came up with Adele's concern, and this is a very dicey and very tricky question. Apart from letting students maybe replace the exam, is a final comprehensive exam, is it worth it for the student to take a comprehensive at the end of the semester, starting from chapter 1 to chapter N? That's a general question I want to put up.
I don't think so, but
me neither.
Yeah, for my course, because my course material, each chapter we cover different concepts for linear system, but at the end of the semester you can connect all these concepts after the students see different approach to solve different problems. So in this case, the comprehensive exam give them the big picture of the course and why we study different tools to use for solving problems.
I mean, my course is like that. I mean, my course is the same thing. I mean, I teach them from basic, equation of computing future values and analyzing it all the way to the end. But I think trying to get the student to go learn the first concept again, all the way to the end of the semester concept, I have finally come to realize that I think the student just panic. And also coming from what Ben's presentation was, and I actually put something on the chart, because if somebody does a comprehensive, you notice, they cram and they study and they end up getting 86, 76%. Is that a measure of how strong the student is, or is something else?
So I have some thoughts on this idea.
Again?
I'm sorry, Robert?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I think it comes down to what is your purpose for giving that comprehensive exam? I could definitely see some situations like what you were alluding to, Adele, where actually having the opportunity to go back and see the big picture of everything you've learned is actually beneficial from the week by week exams. Like if you want to make sure that students know how to distinguish which techniques you taught them to use on which kinds of problems, it could be good to sort of have that comprehensive exam where you present them with a problem and ask them to identify that. That's something that you might not be able to get in a week by week, topic by topic exam. But in general, I'm not a big fan for exams sake. And if the whole reason is just to test them on the same kind of stuff you've tested them on before, just you're doing it again and they have to cram more, I'm sort of with the philosophy that, I don't know, there's not really much point in doing that other than just to say you did it. One other thing I would point out is I really like the way Ben thought about it is what are the key priorities, the key skills that students need to take out of this course? Like Ben, you hammered on the importance of free body diagrams. So Ben, you might decide that it's important to have a comprehensive exam that's all about have students master drawing the various different kinds of free body diagrams that they need to, because that's something that's very important to you. So that's my thoughts on it.
I mean, John, wouldn't you want to use, instead of a comprehensive exam, if you want to test the student on a system-wide understanding or acceptance of the concept, wouldn't you want to use a very beautiful, complex, well-structured take-home exam, even in the group setting?
I don't know if that question was directed toward anybody. I missed that part, but I'll throw in this.
No, to everybody.
Yeah, this sort of piggybacks on that and what John just said. I would agree that small exams, you can't really ask those big questions, but I just push that to projects, because when I'm convinced that during the exam setting, there's so much anxiety for some students that they have no creativity. And you need that creativity to design, to solve complex problems. Yeah. And so I just push those to projects, and then they have at least a week to work on it. They tend to work on it on the night before, but they have at least a week to think about it. And a lot of those projects, they're sort of in two stages, where there's one stage where I give them feedback and tell them what they have to fix before the final presentation, not a presentation, the final report is presented. So I've tried to remove all, I mean, I don't want to say all complex thinking, but I've tried to remove a lot of that burden off of exams, because I don't think students are showing that on exams. And I'm just sort of making sure that they understand the tools, and then doing more complex things in class and in projects.
And I agree with what Ben said. I think students need feedback a lot to know whether they are using the correct way to learn and think. So I'm glad that in my electronic courses, I have labs almost every week. So I design a lot of problems in the lab handout. When students do the lab, they also need to think about the principle, the calculation, the simulation, and also when I walk around, I have a lot of opportunity to communicate with them, talk with them to make sure they know what the point is and their understanding is right. So if we don't use a lot of exam, I think the communication during lab is also very, very great.
Yeah, on what Ben was saying though, like I found what I did with some of the shorter quiz exams, whatever you want to call them, is I felt like I could address some of the complex problems I would have the quiz itself would have a theme, and then I would have 3 questions that address the core things, outcomes I wanted them to learn that were pretty straightforward, and then would ask questions at the end, more conceptual, like, well, what happens if you change this based on this other aspect, say, or some detailed questions where they would write answers. Like, so I had one quiz where I basically took a jet ski, and every question on the quiz was formed around a jet ski moving on the surface of the water. And asked fundamental questions about pressure differences and the energy required for the pump to make the thing move, but then would ask things like, well, if the waves increase the friction, what would happen, and explain that to me, and how would you change the design to deal with it? And so the whole quiz, really, the individual questions address these specific topic, the specific things in the topics, but the overall quiz together addressed a more complex issue that the students may not even realize until they got to the end and said, all those questions were about the same thing.
Right, so we have time for one more question. I think it's going to be from Nikki.
Yeah, I had a question for Ben. I think you may have already answered it, but I was curious when you were describing your exam and how so much of the points are from the exams, and you said that you really reduced those points, trying to reduce the stress, reduce the points. Did those points then go to projects? Is that where they went?
They did. They went to projects. I also bumped up homeworks, and I have a little assignments during the week, and I pushed a few more points to those, just because that's where they're spending a lot of their effort, and that's what I want them to focus on, is that practice. So they got more points, and then the projects got more points.
Thanks.
All right, folks. Well, I actually didn't plan for this originally to be a showcase that was centered around assessment. That sort of emerged authentically. And I think we've had a wonderful conversation about sort of the different aspects to consider there and a lot of good ideas floating around. I hope you all found this experience valuable, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. A quick round of applause again for the presenters who gave some wonderful presentations today. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.